Amaka adjusted her kente-patterned blazer and smoothed her long, neatly braided hair as she stepped into the glass-walled office of Orion Tech Solutions in downtown London. It was her first day as the executive assistant to the enigmatic CEO, Ethan Hart, and she was determined to make a lasting impression. Her dark brown eyes sparkled with determination, and her slim, elegant frame moved with a confidence that belied the nervous fluttering in her chest. As she walked past the rows of cubicles, a hush fell over the office. Heads turned and whispers followed her, but Amaka was unfazed. She had worked hard to get here, leaving behind the bustling streets of Lagos for this opportunity. The office was a symphony of muted tones and busy keystrokes, a sharp contrast to the vibrant chaos of her homeland. When she finally arrived at the corner office, she took a deep breath and knocked. "Come in," a deep voice called from within. Amaka pushed the door open to find Ethan Hart, a tall, dark-skinned man with an air of authority, seated behind a sleek mahogany desk. His black suit fit him impeccably, the blue shirt beneath adding a touch of warmth to his otherwise intimidating presence. His sharp, assessing gaze met hers, and for a brief moment, time seemed to stand still. "You must be Amaka," he said, extending a hand. His voice was calm, but carried an undertone of curiosity. "Welcome to Orion Tech. I hope your journey here wasn't too troublesome." Amaka smiled politely as she shook his hand, noting the firm grip. "Not at all, sir. I'm ready to get started." But as they spoke, there was a flicker of recognition in Ethan's eyes, something that unnerved her. Had they met before? The moment passed too quickly for her to dwell on it, but the feeling lingered as she left his office. By lunchtime, Amaka was the talk of the office. Her undeniable beauty and effortless grace drew admiration, but not everyone was welcoming. Vanessa, the head of marketing, watched Amaka from across the break room with thinly veiled disdain. "She's too perfect," Vanessa muttered to her colleague. "Nobody's that flawless. Just wait, there's something off about her." Amaka, oblivious to the growing tension, focused on settling into her role. She quickly learned that working for Ethan Hart was no small feat. He was demanding but fair, his instructions precise, and his expectations high. Yet, beneath his professional exterior, there was a complexity she couldn't quite decipher. And then there were those moments, fleeting but unmistakable, when their eyes met, and the air between them seemed charged with unspoken words. Late one evening, as most of the staff prepared to leave, Ethan called Amaka into his office. The city's lights twinkled through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a soft glow on the room. "Close the door," he said, his voice quieter than usual. Amaka hesitated but did as he asked. "Is everything all right, sir?" she asked, her tone cautious. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "There's something I need to tell you," he began, but just then, the office door burst open. Vanessa stood there, her face flushed with anger. "Ethan, what is this about?" she demanded, her eyes darting between them. Amaka stepped back, stunned by the intrusion, as Ethan rose to his feet, his calm demeanor unshaken. "Vanessa, this is neither the time nor place," he said firmly. But the damage was done, and Amaka's mind raced with questions. What had she just walked into? Amaka's curiosity was piqued after the incident with Vanessa. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story, and her interactions with Ethan grew increasingly complicated. He maintained his professional demeanor, but there were moments of vulnerability that made her question the layers beneath his composed exterior. One afternoon, while organizing files in his office, Amaka stumbled upon an old photograph tucked between documents. The picture showed Ethan with a woman who bore an uncanny resemblance to Vanessa, her arm looped through his. They looked happy, carefree, and deeply in love. Amaka's stomach twisted as she quickly replaced the photograph, but the image lingered in her mind. When Ethan returned from a meeting, he noticed her distracted expression. "Is everything all right?" he asked, his tone laced with concern. "Yes, sir," Amaka replied quickly, avoiding his gaze. But her mind was far from settled, and she couldn't help but wonder about the story behind that photograph and the connection between Ethan and Vanessa. Vanessa's animosity toward Amaka grew more palpable with each passing day. Subtle jabs during meetings turned into outright dismissiveness, and Amaka found herself questioning whether she had done something to warrant the hostility. Despite her best efforts to remain professional, the tension weighed on her. One evening, as she prepared to leave, she overheard a heated argument coming from the conference room. Vanessa's voice was raised, her words sharp and accusatory. "You're making a mistake, Ethan. She doesn't belong here." Ethan's response was calm but firm. "This is not your decision to make, Vanessa. I've made my choice." Amaka's heart raced as she hurried past the closed door. She couldn't ignore the sinking feeling that she was at the center of a conflict she didn't fully understand. The walls of Orion Tech seemed to hold secrets that were slowly unraveling, and she was caught in the middle of it all. Ethan called Amaka to his office the next morning. His expression was serious, yet his tone was softer than usual. "I think it's time you know the truth about Vanessa and me." Amaka's heart raced as she sat down. Ethan hesitated before speaking. "We were engaged once years ago, but things ended badly. She hasn't let go, and it's partly my fault." The confession stunned Amaka. Ethan's vulnerability was unexpected, and it opened a new perspective on the tension in the office. But it also raised questions she wasn't sure she wanted answered. What role did she play in this unresolved drama, and why had Ethan chosen to tell her now? The revelation about Ethan and Vanessa's past lingered in Amaka's mind as she tried to focus on her work. The bustling office seemed quieter, each click of the keyboard a sharp reminder of her divided attention. Ethan's words replayed in her head, his calm voice tinged with regret. Later that day, as Amaka passed by Vanessa's desk, their eyes met briefly. Vanessa's glare was colder than usual, and it sent a chill down Amaka's spine. It was clear the story between Ethan and Vanessa was far from over, and somehow she had been thrust into the middle of it. Amaka found an unexpected ally in Priya, a colleague in the finance department, who had always greeted her warmly. During lunch, Priya leaned in and whispered, "Don't let Vanessa get to you. She's been like that ever since Ethan broke things off with her. Everyone's noticed how she's targeting you." "Why me?" Amaka asked, genuinely puzzled. "Because you're everything she isn't anymore. New, confident, and a potential threat. Just stay strong. Ethan sees something in you, something good." The reassurance bolstered Amaka's resolve, but it also left her wondering, did Ethan truly see her in that light, or was she simply a pawn in a game she didn't understand? That evening, Ethan stayed late in the office. As Amaka gathered her things to leave, she noticed the light still on in his office. She hesitated before knocking softly on the door. "Come in," he said, his voice weary. "You should go home, sir," she said gently. "You've had a long day." Ethan looked up, his expression softening at the sight of her. "Sometimes work is an escape," he admitted, "but you're right. Thank you, Amaka." As their eyes met, the unspoken connection between them grew stronger. It was a fleeting moment, but it left an indelible mark on both of them. For the first time, Amaka felt a glimmer of hope amidst the chaos. Hope that perhaps, despite everything, there was something real between them. The days that followed seemed to simmer with an uneasy peace. Vanessa had grown quieter, but no less resentful, her eyes following Amaka with a penetrating intensity. Amaka, however, held her head high and concentrated on her work. The faint encouragement from Priya and the subtle moments of warmth she shared with Ethan fortified her spirit. One morning, as Amaka stepped into Ethan's office with a set of reports, he surprised her with a rare smile. "Good work on the proposal," he said, his voice softer than usual. "You're proving to be an asset to this company." The compliment was unexpected, and it made Amaka's heart flutter. She thanked him quietly and returned to her desk, feeling the weight of his words linger. Was this a turning point, or just another fleeting moment in a whirlwind of contradictions? Vanessa, however, was far from done. One afternoon, she cornered Amaka in the break room. "Do you really think you're special?" Vanessa's tone was icy, her words cutting. "You're just another flavor of the month. Ethan's attention doesn't last." Amaka's breath caught, but she met Vanessa's glare with calm determination. "I'm here to do my job, not to entertain office drama. If you have a problem with me, take it up with HR." Vanessa's expression darkened, but she said nothing more. Amaka walked away, her hands trembling slightly. She couldn't let Vanessa's venomous words derail her, but the seed of doubt had been planted. What if Vanessa was right? The following day, Ethan called Amaka into his office. The tension between them had grown palpable, but today his demeanor was different. He stood by the window, the city skyline behind him, and turned to face her with a serious expression. "I have a proposal for you," he began. "There's an upcoming conference in Paris. I want you to join me. It's a significant opportunity for us to showcase the work you've been doing." Amaka's heart raced. She wasn't sure if this was purely professional or if there was something more behind his words. Still, she nodded. "I'd be honored, sir." "Good," he said, a faint smile breaking through. "I trust you'll represent the company well." As she left his office, her mind buzzed with anticipation. The trip felt like a pivotal moment, but she couldn't ignore the lingering shadows of Vanessa's warning. What awaited her in Paris? The days leading up to the Paris conference were a blur of preparations. Amaka threw herself into her work, perfecting presentations and ensuring every detail was accounted for. She avoided Vanessa's glances and focused on proving her worth. When they arrived in Paris, the city's romantic ambiance seemed to heighten everything. Ethan and Amaka worked seamlessly during the day, their professional dynamic stronger than ever. But in the evenings, when the city lights twinkled against the Seine, there was an undeniable tension between them. One evening, after a successful presentation, Ethan suggested they have dinner. The candle-lit bistro was warm and intimate, and for the first time, Ethan allowed himself to relax. "You've exceeded my expectations," he said, his voice low but sincere. Amaka's cheeks flushed. "Thank you, sir. That means a lot coming from you." As their conversation flowed, Amaka noticed a vulnerability in Ethan that he rarely showed. But just as she began to lower her guard, a message flashed on Ethan's phone. His face darkened, and the moment shifted. "I have to take this," he said, abruptly ending their dinner. As Amaka returned to her hotel room alone, she couldn't help but feel that the shadows of his past had followed them to Paris. The next morning, Ethan's demeanor was cold, his focus entirely on the conference. Amaka tried to shake off the sense of unease, but the distance between them was palpable. During a break, she wandered into a quiet garden outside the venue. She needed air, a moment to collect herself. To her surprise, Ethan appeared moments later. "Amaka," he began, his tone hesitant. "There's something I need to explain." He hesitated before continuing. "The message last night, it was from Vanessa. She's been trying to interfere with this project, threatening to leak company data if I don't meet her demands." Amaka's breath caught. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Ethan sighed. "I didn't want to involve you. You've already had to endure enough because of her, but I can't keep this from you anymore." The weight of his confession settled heavily between them. Amaka felt torn, caught between the professional responsibility she had to Orion Tech and the personal feelings she couldn't deny were growing for Ethan. When they returned to London, the tension within the office had reached its peak. Vanessa seemed emboldened, her presence a constant reminder of the unresolved conflict. Amaka felt the pressure mounting, but resolved to remain professional. Ethan, however, seemed to unravel. His typically composed demeanor cracked, and he began avoiding Amaka. Priya noticed the change and pulled her aside one afternoon. "What's going on between you two?" she asked gently. "Nothing," Amaka replied quickly. But Priya's knowing look made her falter. "It's complicated," she admitted. Priya nodded. "Just remember, Amaka, you deserve clarity. Don't let anyone keep you in the dark." The words stayed with her, and that evening, as she stood by her desk long after most of the office had emptied, Ethan approached. "We need to talk," he said simply. In the quiet of Ethan's office, Amaka finally voiced the questions that had been weighing on her. "Why did you bring me into this? If Vanessa is such a threat, why not confront her directly?" Ethan ran a hand through his hair, his frustration evident. "Because it's not that simple. Vanessa holds leverage over me, over the company, but you're the one person I can trust." The admission was both a relief and a burden. Amaka's voice softened. "Ethan, trust goes both ways. You can't protect me by keeping me in the dark." Their conversation stretched late into the night, the boundaries between professional and personal blurring further. By the time they left, Amaka felt a mix of emotions, hope, confusion, and the lingering question of whether they could truly overcome the shadows that loomed over them. The next day at work began quietly, but Amaka felt a storm brewing. The tension in the office was suffocating, and Vanessa's smug demeanor only made it worse. At midday, Ethan called for an all-staff meeting, his voice firm but devoid of its usual warmth. Vanessa's voice rang out as the meeting ended. "Ethan," she said sweetly, "I have some documents you might want to review." "Sensitive documents." Her cryptic tone sent a shiver through Amaka. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he nodded, his expression unreadable. Vanessa caught Amaka's gaze as she walked out, her lips curling into a victorious smirk. Later that evening, as Amaka prepared to leave, she received an email from an unknown sender. The subject line read, "Be careful who you trust." The attached document contained an email chain between Ethan and Vanessa, filled with thinly veiled threats and references to some incident from years ago. Shaken, Amaka forwarded the email to Ethan without a word. Minutes later, her phone buzzed. It was him. "Come to my office," he said curtly. When she arrived, he was pacing the room. "Where did you get this?" he asked, holding up his phone. "It was sent to me anonymously," she replied, her voice trembling. "Ethan, what is Vanessa talking about? What incident?" Ethan sank into his chair, his hands covering his face. "It's complicated," he said finally. "But if Vanessa is leaking this, she's more desperate than I thought." That night, Ethan devised a plan to confront Vanessa and end her manipulations once and for all. "I need your help," he said to Amaka. "You're the only one I trust to keep this discreet." Amaka hesitated. She had already been pulled too deep into the drama, but the look in Ethan's eyes, pleading, vulnerable, made her relent. "What do you need me to do?" He handed her a folder. "This is a counter-proposal for the board. If Vanessa tries to sabotage the company, this will neutralize her. But I need you to deliver it directly to the board president." Amaka nodded, her resolve strengthening. She wasn't sure where this path would lead, but she was determined to see it through. The following day, Amaka found herself in a high-rise office overlooking the city, waiting to meet the board president. The stakes were high, and the weight of the responsibility pressed heavily on her. When the board president finally arrived, a tall woman with an air of authority, Amaka explained the situation with precision and handed over the folder. The president listened carefully, her expression hardening. "This is serious," she said. "We'll take it from here." Amaka left the meeting with a sense of accomplishment, but the relief was short-lived. Back at the office, Vanessa was waiting for her, leaning casually against Amaka's desk. "I know what you've been up to," Vanessa said, her voice laced with venom. "You think you've won, don't you?" Amaka didn't reply, but the icy stare Vanessa gave her sent a clear message. The battle was far from over. That evening, Ethan asked Amaka to meet him at a nearby cafe. The usually reserved CEO looked uncharacteristically unsettled as he sipped his coffee. "Amaka, I owe you an explanation," he began. Over the next hour, Ethan revealed the full story. Years ago, Vanessa had uncovered a mistake he'd made early in his career, something that could have ruined him. She had used it to manipulate him, holding the threat of exposure over his head. "But then you came along," he said, his voice softening. "You reminded me that there's still good in this world, that I don't have to keep running." Amaka's heart swelled at his words, but the vulnerability in his voice also broke her. "Ethan, you don't have to face this alone anymore," she said, reaching for his hand. Their fingers touched briefly before he pulled away, a pained expression crossing his face. "I don't want you to get hurt because of me." The next morning, chaos erupted. A damning article about Ethan appeared online, detailing past missteps and painting him as an untrustworthy leader. The source? Anonymous, but Amaka knew it had Vanessa's fingerprints all over it. The board called an emergency meeting, and whispers filled the office. Amaka watched helplessly as Ethan walked into the conference room, his shoulders tense, but his head held high. When he emerged hours later, his face was pale but determined. "They've given me a week to fix this," he said. "If I can't, I'm out." Ethan's week-long deadline loomed over the office like a thundercloud. The employees whispered in clusters, their unease palpable. Amaka, however, worked tirelessly by his side, her loyalty unwavering. Yet, Vanessa was far from defeated. 2 days into the week, an email circulated through the office containing screenshots of financial irregularities allegedly tied to Ethan. The accusations were explosive, suggesting that Ethan had mismanaged funds to cover up a personal mistake. Ethan was livid, but it was Amaka who noticed the timing. "Vanessa is escalating," she said. "She's not just trying to hurt you anymore. She wants to destroy you." Ethan nodded grimly. "Then it's time to show her what we're made of." Ethan and Amaka worked late into the night, piecing together evidence to counter Vanessa's claims. Amaka's sharp eyes and knack for detail proved invaluable, uncovering discrepancies in Vanessa's own records. But as they dug deeper, they discovered something unexpected. Vanessa wasn't working alone. "She has a contact," Ethan said, his voice low. "Someone outside the company who's feeding her information." The realization sent chills through Amaka. If Vanessa had external backing, their fight wasn't just internal office politics anymore. It was a full-blown power struggle. The next morning, a stranger appeared in the office lobby. Dressed in a charcoal gray suit, he introduced himself as Richard Cole, a private investigator hired by the board to ensure transparency during the crisis. His piercing gaze swept the room, lingering briefly on Amaka. Richard's presence only added to the tension. He spent hours in closed-door meetings with various employees, and rumors swirled about who might be feeding Vanessa information. When it was Amaka's turn, Richard's questions were direct but polite. "Do you believe Ethan Hart is fit to lead this company?" he asked. "I do," Amaka replied firmly, meeting his gaze. "And I believe Vanessa is the one who should be questioned." Richard smiled faintly. "Interesting perspective. Thank you for your time." By midweek, Vanessa grew bolder. She called a surprise staff meeting, her voice dripping with feigned concern. "It's no secret that our company is facing challenges," she began. "But transparency is key to trust, and trust is the foundation of leadership." Her speech was filled with veiled jabs at Ethan, but her real bombshell came at the end. "I've submitted my findings to the board," she announced. "They will decide what's best for Orion Tech." The room erupted in murmurs as Vanessa left, her head held high. Amaka felt a surge of anger, but also a spark of determination. Vanessa might have played her hand, but the game wasn't over yet. That evening, as Amaka sorted through a pile of old documents in Ethan's office, she found a USB drive taped beneath one of the drawers. Curiosity piqued. She plugged it into her laptop. What she discovered left her breathless. The drive contained files that proved Vanessa had been embezzling money from the company for years. There were bank statements, forged invoices, and even email exchanges implicating her accomplice, a former Orion Tech consultant. Amaka immediately showed the files to Ethan. His eyes widened as he scanned the screen. "This is it," he said. "This is what we need to take her down." The final showdown took place at a board meeting the following day. Vanessa arrived confident, her smile smug as she took her seat. Ethan, however, was calm, his demeanor giving nothing away. When it was his turn to speak, Ethan stood and handed each board member a folder containing the evidence Amaka had uncovered. "This is the truth," he said. "Not just about my leadership, but about the person trying to dismantle this company from within." Vanessa's face turned ashen as the board members reviewed the documents. When they began questioning her, her composure crumbled. She tried to deny the accusations, but the evidence was irrefutable. By the end of the meeting, the board had reached a decision. Vanessa was terminated effective immediately, and legal proceedings were initiated against her. The office buzzed with the news, and the tension that had gripped Orion Tech for weeks began to lift. Ethan called Amaka into his office that evening. "I couldn't have done this without you," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. "You've been my anchor through all of this." Amaka smiled, but her emotions were conflicted. The victory felt hollow in the shadow of all they had endured. "What happens now?" she asked softly. Ethan's gaze lingered on her, his expression unreadable. "Now, we rebuild." The office at Orion Tech felt lighter in the days following Vanessa's departure. Employees who had tiptoed around the simmering tension were now more relaxed, and productivity began to climb. Ethan wasted no time instituting measures to rebuild trust within the company, hosting open forums where staff could voice their concerns and suggestions. Amaka, however, remained a quiet presence at his side. She immersed herself in work, sorting through the lingering chaos Vanessa had left behind. Though the ordeal was over, its emotional toll lingered. Ethan noticed her silence and decided to address it one late evening as they worked in his office. "You've been distant," he said, breaking the quiet. "Is everything all right?" Amaka looked up from her laptop, her eyes betraying her fatigue. "I'm just processing everything. It's been a lot." Ethan leaned back in his chair, his expression soft. "I don't know how I would have gotten through this without you. You're more than just an employee, Amaka. You've shown strength and integrity that few people have." The sincerity in his words touched her, but it also unsettled her. She wasn't sure where they stood anymore, professionally or personally. Despite the newfound peace in the office, Amaka couldn't shake the feeling that Vanessa's fallout wasn't the end of the story. Rumors circulated about Vanessa threatening to sue the company for wrongful termination. Ethan dismissed the threats, confident in the evidence they had gathered, but Amaka couldn't help worrying. One evening, as she locked up the office, she noticed a figure lingering near the building's entrance. Her heart skipped a beat, and she quickly called security, but by the time they arrived, the figure was gone. When she told Ethan about the incident, his expression darkened. "I'll look into it," he promised. But Amaka could see the concern etched in his features. Vanessa's influence might have been severed, but her determination to retaliate still loomed. A week later, Amaka received an anonymous email containing screenshots of her LinkedIn profile, a message that read, "Careful who you trust." She immediately forwarded it to Ethan, who contacted the company's IT department to trace the source. The results were inconclusive, but the timing was suspicious. "Do you think it's Vanessa?" Amaka asked Ethan during a private meeting. "It's possible," Ethan replied, "but it could also be someone else aligned with her, or someone trying to exploit the chaos." The uncertainty unsettled them both. While Ethan assured her that the company's security measures were robust, the incident left a lingering tension between them. They were victorious, but their battle wasn't entirely over. Amid the lingering challenges, Ethan surprised Amaka with an unexpected proposal. "We're launching a new initiative, an innovation hub in Lagos. I want you to oversee it." Amaka's heart skipped. Lagos was her home, and the chance to lead such a project was both thrilling and daunting. But the timing felt complicated. especially given the unresolved tension between her and Ethan. "Why me?" she asked cautiously. Ethan's smile was faint but genuine. "Because I trust you. You've proven yourself time and again, and I can't think of anyone better suited for the role." Amaka nodded slowly. "I'll think about it." The opportunity was tempting, but it also raised questions she wasn't ready to answer, questions about her future in the company, her relationship with Ethan, and the unresolved feelings they both seemed to be avoiding. 2 days before Amaka was set to make her decision about the Lagos project, news broke that Vanessa had filed a defamation lawsuit against Orion Tech. The move sent shockwaves through the company, threatening to undo the progress they had made since her departure. Ethan's response was swift. "We'll fight this," he told the leadership team during an emergency meeting. "She's grasping at straws." But Amaka sensed the strain in his voice. This was yet another battle in a war that seemed never-ending, and it was taking its toll on everyone involved. After the meeting, Ethan pulled Amaka aside. "Whatever happens, I don't want this to affect your decision about Lagos," he said. "This company needs you there." Amaka hesitated, torn between her loyalty to Orion Tech and the desire to protect herself from being caught in yet another storm. On the eve of the Lagos announcement, Amaka made her decision. She knocked on Ethan's office door, finding him hunched over his desk, his suit jacket draped over the chair. "I'll do it," she said simply. Ethan looked up, his expression a mix of relief and gratitude. "You have no idea how much this means to me, to the company." Amaka smiled faintly. "I hope I can live up to the trust you've placed in me." "You already have," Ethan replied. His voice was soft, but his words carried weight. For the first time, Amaka felt a sense of clarity, as though the path forward was finally beginning to take shape. The lawsuit Vanessa filed against Orion Tech was plastered across industry news outlets within days. Headlines screamed of corporate drama and personal vendettas, painting Ethan and the company in a negative light. Employees whispered in hallways, and shareholders demanded answers. Amaka, though not directly named in the suit, found herself swept up in the storm. She felt the weight of judgment in every glance and overheard snippets of conversations speculating about her involvement in the internal fallout. Ethan, as always, stood resolute, but Amaka could see the strain in his eyes. "Her claims are baseless," Ethan assured her during a late-night strategy meeting. "The evidence is on our side, and our legal team is strong." "But public opinion isn't always swayed by evidence," Amaka countered. "She's weaponizing perception." Ethan nodded gravely. "Then we'll need to be smarter, transparent." To everyone's surprise, Priya from the finance department stepped forward with information that turned the tide. She had quietly kept records of Vanessa's questionable transactions, evidence of unethical behavior that had flown under the radar for months. With her testimony, the company's lawyers gained a critical advantage. "You didn't have to do this," Amaka told Priya during a coffee break. "Someone had to," Priya replied firmly. "Vanessa's power games have hurt too many people. It's time someone stood up to her." The revelation bolstered Amaka's spirits, and she worked alongside Ethan and the legal team to compile an airtight defense. But as the court date approached, Vanessa's threats grew more personal. One morning, Amaka found an envelope on her desk. Inside was a photograph of her with Ethan, taken from an angle that suggested intimacy. Along with it was a typed note. They'll never believe you weren't involved. Her hands trembled as she showed the note to Ethan. His jaw tightened as he examined the contents. "She's desperate," he said through gritted teeth. "She's trying to rattle us." "It's working," Amaka admitted. "What if this gets out? My reputation, your reputation, it could all be destroyed." Ethan stepped closer, his expression fierce. "We'll handle this, together." The lawsuit went to court, and Vanessa's legal team unleashed a barrage of accusations. They painted a picture of a hostile work environment and personal vendettas, aiming to tarnish Ethan's credibility. The photograph of Ethan and Amaka was introduced as evidence, fueling rumors of favoritism and unethical behavior. Amaka took the stand reluctantly, her heart pounding as she answered questions about her relationship with Ethan. She kept her answers professional, emphasizing their work dynamic and denying any inappropriate conduct. When Ethan took the stand, he delivered a passionate defense, highlighting the culture of integrity at Orion Tech and exposing Vanessa's attempts to manipulate the narrative. His words were measured but powerful, earning murmurs of approval from the courtroom. During cross-examination, Priya's testimony became the turning point. She presented detailed records of Vanessa's misconduct, including falsified expense reports and unauthorized account access. The evidence dismantled Vanessa's claims, shifting the courtroom's mood. Vanessa's composed facade began to crack. She lashed out during questioning, accusing the company of conspiring against her. Her outbursts only reinforced the perception of her instability. Amaka watched the scene unfold with a mix of relief and unease. They were winning, but the cost had been high. The court ruled in favor of Orion Tech, dismissing Vanessa's lawsuit as unfounded. The verdict was a vindication, but it came with scars. The company's reputation had been bruised, and Amaka's personal life had been dragged into the spotlight. After the ruling, Ethan gathered the leadership team to thank them for their support during the ordeal. His gratitude was sincere, but Amaka noticed the exhaustion in his posture. The battle had taken its toll on him as well. That evening, Ethan called Amaka to his office. "Thank you for standing by me," he said, his voice quieter than usual. "I know this hasn't been easy for you." Amaka met his gaze. "We survived. That's what matters." Ethan smiled faintly. "It's more than that. You showed courage, Amaka. You've been my anchor." The words hung between them, laden with unspoken emotions. For the first time, Amaka allowed herself to hope that their connection was something more than circumstantial. Just as the dust began to settle from the trial, a new storm emerged. An anonymous email was sent to the company's board of directors, alleging that Ethan had buried a past scandal at a previous job, a scandal involving insider trading. The email included vague but incriminating evidence, enough to reignite the tension within Orion Tech. The board convened an emergency meeting, and Ethan's leadership was called into question. Amaka watched helplessly as the man she had grown to admire was forced to defend himself once again. His confidence remained unshaken outwardly, but in private moments, she saw cracks in his armor. "Do you believe me, Amaka?" Ethan asked one night after a long meeting. "I do," she said firmly. "But who's doing this? And why now?" Ethan's expression darkened. "Vanessa had allies. I suspect one of them is trying to finish what she started." Determined to uncover the truth, Amaka began her own investigation. With Priya's help, she tracked down a name mentioned in the anonymous email, Andrew Carter, a former colleague of Ethan's. A quick search revealed that Andrew had been fired from the same company Ethan had left years ago, under circumstances that were never publicly disclosed. Amaka decided to confront Andrew. Pretending to be a journalist, she arranged a meeting at a coffee shop. Andrew, a wiry man with a nervous demeanor, was hesitant to speak at first, but Amaka's probing questions eventually made him slip. "Ethan's the golden boy, isn't he?" Andrew sneered. "Always gets away clean while the rest of us take the fall." "Is that what happened to you?" Amaka pressed. "Did he set you up?" Andrew's bitter laugh was answer enough. "Not exactly, but let's just say Ethan knows how to cover his tracks." Armed with her findings, Amaka confronted Ethan in his office late one evening. "Who is Andrew Carter?" she demanded, placing the printed emails on his desk. Ethan's face hardened. "Andrew was a colleague, yes, but he's lying about me." "Then tell me the truth," Amaka insisted. "If I'm going to stand by you, I need to know everything." Ethan hesitated, his usual composure faltering. "Years ago, at my previous company, Andrew was part of a scheme to manipulate stock prices. I discovered it and reported him to the authorities, but the fallout affected everyone, including me. That's why I left." "Why didn't you ever mention this?" Amaka asked, her voice softer now. "Because it was behind me," Ethan said. "Or so I thought." Amaka studied him, her heart aching at the vulnerability in his eyes. "We'll fight this," she said resolutely, "just like we fought Vanessa." In the days that followed, Amaka dug deeper into Andrew's claims. With Priya's help, she uncovered a key detail. Andrew had been receiving payments from a shell company tied to Vanessa's legal team. It became clear that Vanessa had orchestrated the attack on Ethan long before her lawsuit was dismissed. Amaka presented the evidence to Ethan, who immediately informed the board. The revelation shifted the narrative, casting doubt on the allegations against Ethan. But the damage to his reputation remained a challenge to overcome. Amaka's relentless pursuit of the truth uncovered another shocking twist. One of the board members, Leonard Briggs, had been working with Vanessa to undermine Ethan. Leonard stood to gain financially if Ethan were removed as CEO, thanks to a deal with a rival company. Ethan confronted Leonard during a heated board meeting. "You betrayed this company for personal gain," Ethan accused, his voice steady but fierce. Leonard denied the claims, but Amaka stepped forward with undeniable evidence: financial transactions linking Leonard to Vanessa and the rival company. The board voted unanimously to remove Leonard, but the betrayal left a bitter taste in everyone's mouth. Trust was a fragile thing, and it would take time to rebuild. With Leonard and Vanessa's schemes exposed, the board rallied behind Ethan. Public statements were made to clear his name, and the company began to regain its footing. Amaka played a crucial role in the recovery, working tirelessly alongside Ethan to repair relationships with investors and employees. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, Ethan invited Amaka to his office. "I couldn't have done this without you," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. "You would have found a way," Amaka replied, smiling softly. "But I'm glad I could help." Ethan stepped closer, the weight of the past few months reflected in his eyes. "You've been my rock, Amaka, through everything." As Orion Tech stabilized, Ethan announced a company retreat to celebrate the team's resilience. The retreat was held at a serene countryside estate, far from the hustle and bustle of the city. For the first time in months, laughter and camaraderie filled the air. Amaka found herself drawn to Ethan during the retreat. They shared quiet moments by the lake, talking about their dreams and fears. "I've been afraid to admit how I feel about you," Ethan said one evening, his voice barely above a whisper. "But not anymore." Amaka's heart swelled with emotion. "I feel the same way," she confessed. "But are we ready for this?" "We'll take it one step at a time," Ethan promised, "as long as we're together." Back in the city, Ethan and Amaka began navigating their new relationship with care. Their love was a bittersweet balm after months of chaos, a reminder of the resilience they had both shown. Amaka continued to excel in her role at Orion Tech, and Ethan remained a steadfast leader. Together, they faced challenges with renewed strength, knowing that their connection was forged in the fire of adversity. Their journey was far from over, but they embraced the uncertainty with open hearts, ready to face whatever came next, together.